What I want to point out here is that, this is September. You see 2.83 billion hex worth of hex in stakes expiring for that month. Same in October is actually the biggest one at 3.73 billion. Ton of hex coming out this month, folks. Again, explaining why, you would see some of these people taking profits at these levels, because keep in mind, many of these stakes were started very early on. They've seen massive gains. They're going to want to take some profit. Other people feel that, hey, this is a ton of money, life-changing wealth. They're going to take it and run. More on that in just a second. Next wick here we see in November, another pretty busy month, a little bit less than October, but 3.35 billion. In December, we get that cut in about almost in half at 1.73 billion, and then it kind of tapers off from there, as you can see. Still some big months, but they pale in comparison to what we're currently immersed in right now. One thing I want to mention about these people, or in this phase right here, this is what we see in almost any asset class that's new and takes off, be it crypto, stocks, precious metals, anything. When there's a lot of profits to be had early on, people get trigger happy. We saw it with Bitcoin, best example there. This is the $1 or maybe even $10 Bitcoin that we always talk about, where people had significant wealth, even $100 Bitcoin if you want to call it that, where people were saying, hey, you know what, I'm a millionaire, or I'm going to take, $500,000-$600,000 out, and it's an all-time high, and I don't want to risk holding it longer and losing any of my gains. So they realized profit. And I believe much of the activity you see going on in the space right now around selling is, directed at that mindset. In just the general asset class itself. It's normal human behavior. Nothing really magical about it. And I'm going to point out a couple other things here that'll show how, great minds or just minds tend to think alike when it comes to patterns. Look at these wicks that are out here. And this is the 15-year chart. I'm going to zoom in on the 90 days here in just a second, but I want to point something out. Notice that every year in November, we have a big wick of stakes expiring, just about every year in November, with a couple exceptions. Why is that? That's because of Christmas. That's because people target the holidays starting around Thanksgiving in November to have some spending money, for the holiday season. Travel, gifts, all this type of thing. Don't forget, many of these ladders were built pre-pandemic, meaning that there was probably other future travel plans and stuff in mind, or just, normal events and some, opportunities that wanted to be seized there, and then realized around the holidays where they could share the wealth and people could go and have fun and visit family and all that kind of thing. Nothing really too shocking there. But we can already see the pattern. I would suspect we'll see the heavier sell-off around November time frame incrementally for a while, or at least around the Christmas time frame. Look at these other big stack of wicks way out here. This is the only other one that really stands out to me, aside from a couple others that are a little bit further beyond, but mostly these. This little grouping here, you know what this is? This is the 10-year, right around the 10-year stake period from launch to, the early adoption amplifier phase. Why is this standing out? Because to get the maximum amount of shares in the system, you got to go out about 10 years. I mean, it's not exactly, it's maybe a few days under the 10-year mark, but basically 10 years out, which is where you see these groupings. These are people that came in, wanted to get the max shares, but not necessarily hold them any further out into the 15-year horizon, which we see a lot of this tapering off through there, which shows, again, people say a lot of things, but the reality is they've stacked a lot heavier in the early phases, mostly because of uncertainty, right? The markets, the project, the space, everything as a whole. Now there's a lot more confidence built in. I think we'll start to see some of these shift out going forward. I would also suspect a good percentage of these will be restaked out, maybe in different proportions. PulseNet was also not a thing back when these stakes were made. So refactoring your staking ladders is something that I think most people, including myself, are considering with the upcoming Pulse chain launch. One other thing I want to point on this chart before we zoom in. A lot of these stakes, so these candles here, they are not static. I think from about here on out, and this is 2025, I think getting up to this, you're going to see a lot of people hitting that 50% point. And depending on the price of Hex, if you're looking at Hex to be in, double digits, maybe even triple around this point in time, you're going to see a lot of people emergency end staking. They're going to nuke their big payday. They're going to give up a whole lot of interest. They'll keep their principal and maybe a little bit of interest, or maybe some just get their principal back at the 50% point. No doubt some people cannot resist taking profits at that time. If you've got to wait another 5 years or 7.5 years, even 3 years, many people, we see it happening right now, but I think you're going to see it in greater quantities around some of these if the price point continues to ratchet up. That benefits everybody in the staking class, by the way. You get paid on those penalties. Half those go to the staking class. And some of these are going to be rather large, I would suspect, going forward.